All right, this video is about biceps brachii, which is on page 95. So biceps means two heads, biceps. And of course, brachii refers to the brachium, which is the upper arm. So biceps is actually named for the number of attachments it has, or heads, okay? We're going to also be talking about triceps brachii, and how many heads do you think that has? Yeah, 3 heads. So biceps and triceps are named for the number of heads that they have. So let's go into the screen share. We'll start looking at these muscles. All right, there's biceps brachii. Biceps brachii is the more superficial muscle on the anterior arm here. There's more than just biceps that sits here, but for now, we'll just talk about biceps. So this is what it looks like. Here are the 2 heads, right there. And then we have an attachment down on the forearm. And it basically spans the length of the humerus. Now, because it has 2 heads, we're going to have 2 origins and 1 insertion. So we have a short head and a long head of biceps brachii. So this one right here with the longer tendon, that's the long head. And this one right here with a shorter tendon is the short head. That makes sense. Okay. So the short head originates on the coracoid process of the scapula. And remember, the coracoid process is this right here. Okay, remember coracoid means raven's beak shaped. That's it right there. The long head originates on the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. So I don't know if you recall from the bone lesson just a few videos ago, but we had this area right here. It is raised. This is the supraglenoid tubercle right there. Of the scapula, not of the humerus, of the scapula. Okay, so short head is the coracoid process, long head is the supraglenoid tubercle. Now the long head, that tendon goes right down through here. Remember, this is the intertubercular groove of the humerus, but remember, it's also called the bicipital groove for this reason, and it's because that tendon of the long head fits right in that groove there. So it has a nice little pocket to sit in. Now, as far as the insertion is concerned, well, you know, the insertion is really on the forearm, and we haven't studied the forearm yet. So again, you just kind of have to memorize this for now. It's going to be the tuberosity of the radius and the aponeurosis of biceps brachii. Okay, so basically what we have, if we take a look, I'm going to stop the share for a second. We take a look at our forearm. We have 2 bones here and here, okay? These 2 bones are the radius on the thumb side and the ulna on the pinky side. The radius crosses over the ulna in a movement called, who remembers what this is? Right, pronation, okay? So the radius crosses over the ulna in pronation. So we know that the radius is here and the ulna is here. Now, the tuberosity of the radius is going to be close to the elbow, close to the antebrachial space, or I'm sorry, antecubital space. But you can't palpate it. So we'll just say that it's right about here, okay? The bicipital aponeurosis, on the other hand, is quite easy to palpate. If you put your fingers right about here, just distal to the antecubital space, and flex or contract your bicep right here, you can feel it tighten right up. Okay, you can even feel the tendon of biceps brachii right here. It's super tough. Okay, it feels like a rope or a guitar string or something like that. Okay, so those you can palpate, the bicipital aponeurosis and the tendon of biceps brachii, the distal tendon of biceps brachii. Okay, so even though we haven't learned the forearm landmarks, we can still palpate the insertion of biceps brachii. Okay, so tuberosity of the radius and aponeurosis of biceps brachii, or bicipital aponeurosis, it is also called. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let's go into muscle premium here. I'm going to play this for a second. Stop. Okay, so what we have here, we actually have 3 muscles here. So I'm going to hide this one or fade it. That's brachialis. Then I'm going to fade this one too. That's brachioradialis, so that we just see biceps. Move that around. Ta-da! All right, so I'm going to tilt it in like this so you can see the attachment, right? This bump right here is the tuberosity of the radius, or radial tuberosity, it's sometimes called as well. So a little bump. So there's the insertions that you can see anyway. And then if we move up, let's move him right there, right? Here's the short head origin, that's the coracoid process there. And here's the long head. The origin you can't really see as well because the acromion process is in the way, but that's okay. Basically what we want here is the movement of biceps brachii. You probably already know that it flexes the elbow, right? Because you can feel it do that. You're pretty familiar with biceps. Every time I teach a new massage class, everybody knows where biceps is, okay? So right here, it's the bulky one right there. Okay, so as far as the actions are concerned, we already know one. Flexing the elbow, see? We do it all the time. We can feel biceps engage. We can feel it contract and shorten. Flexion of the elbow, absolutely. Because of its attachment on the radius, biceps brachii can supinate the forearm. So remember, I showed you just a minute ago, I showed you pronation where the radius was moving over top of the ulna, right? Well, because biceps attaches to the radius, it can supinate as it flexes, okay? So supination is going to look like bringing your palm towards your face when you're flexing the elbow, okay? So biceps brachii flexes the elbow, supinates the forearm, but it crosses the shoulder joint. So crosses the glenohumeral joint here. And the first rule of anatomy, or the first rule of kinesiology really should be, if it crosses a joint, it's going to have an effect on that joint. And this muscle crosses 2 joints, therefore it is going to have actions at 2 joints. So as far as the shoulder is concerned, it flexes the shoulder as well. So flexes the elbow, supinates the forearm, flexes the shoulder. So let's go back in. All we see here is the elbow flexion. But you see how it pulls on the radius. So since it pulls on the radius, if the arm is already in supination, as it is when your arm hangs down by your side, or I'm sorry, pronation, when the arm hangs down by the side, when your elbow flexes, it's going to pull the forearm into supination. Okay, and you can kind of see that. It's in supination. Okay, it is not showing you flexion of the shoulder, but you can imagine if it's pulling here, it's going to pull up here as well. Okay. Now, on to triceps. We like to do biceps and triceps together. Triceps, brachii. Some interesting things about triceps. First of all, it is the only muscle on the posterior arm. Where the biceps was concerned, we had a couple of other muscles in there and I had to fade them on the visible body. But with triceps, that's it. That's the only thing that's back here. Nothing but triceps. But remember, it has 3 heads, so there's 3 different parts to it. Only muscle on the posterior arm. It is a strong elbow extender because it is an antagonist to biceps, right? When we were talking about antagonist and synergist in a previous video, we used biceps and triceps as the example. So when the biceps contract, the elbow flexes. When the triceps contract, it's a tongue twister. When the triceps contract, the elbow is extended. There are 3 heads, of course, to the triceps. We know that from the name. And we also know the location from the name. It's on the upper arm. Here we are. So here are the heads of triceps. We have the long head, which attaches to the lateral border of the scapula. We have a little teeny medial head in here. And then we have a lateral head. Both the, medial head and lateral head attached to the posterior humerus. You have a very thick tendon for triceps. And if somebody has worked their triceps through weightlifting and things like that, you will be able to see the tendinous division on the posterior arm. Many of us don't have that. You pretty much have to do arm exercises in order to get that definition, but on some people you can see it. So this is the insertion right here. It's a big, thick tendon that inserts on the olecranon process. And remember, the olecranon process is this right here, and yes, my elbow is scratched up. Maybe I'll show you the unscratched elbow. There we go. The olecranon process, right, is the pointy part of your elbow. That's where triceps inserts. All right, so let's take a look at the actual origin and insertion. So the long head, this one right here, infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. Now, I know the picture really doesn't do this justice because the origin says infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and that is right there. So remember this part right there. And this picture looks like the origin is quite a bit lower than that, but that is where it is supposed to be attaching, the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. Okay, so the lateral head, this one right here, is the posterior surface of the proximal half of the humerus. That is a mouthful. Posterior surface of the proximal half of the humerus. It is kind of alliterative. It kind of has a cadence to it if you say it over and over. Posterior half of the posterior surface of the proximal half of the humerus. That is a good way to memorize it if you put like a little cadence to it, almost like a march. But it's just trying to describe the back of the humerus here. So it's like this part right here. How do we describe that? Well, it's the posterior surface of the proximal half of the humerus. The medial head is very similar. So it's going to be the posterior surface of the distal half of the humerus. So between the medial head and the lateral head, they cover a lot of the posterior humerus, which is why it's so smooth back here, right? It's not roughened. We don't have a lot of muscle attachment. It's all covered by that tendon. Okay, So the medial head and the lateral head are almost identical, except for the words proximal and distal in their names. The insertion, of course, is the olecranon process of the ulna, as I had mentioned. And then as far as actions are concerned, we do have actions for all of the head. So triceps as a whole, and that's extension of the elbow. We just talked about that. That's easy. And then we have the long head. The long head technically crosses the shoulder joint, okay? I know it is hard to visualize, but it is true. So we have actions at the shoulder. So we have extension of the shoulder for the long head of triceps, and we have adduction of the shoulder for the long head of the triceps. Now this one's kind of easy to visualize, adduction, right? Because we're going from here to here. Okay, so we're bringing the arm towards the midline of the body, adduction. Okay, it's sort of a diagonal, but we're going this way, so it's adduction. All right. Extension of the shoulder is also a little bit easier to visualize because we are on the posterior of the body. Posterior muscles typically do posterior type actions. This is no exception. We have extension of the shoulder produced by triceps brachii, long head. Okay, so let's see if we go into muscle premium here. Instead of extension or instead of flexion, let's do this. Let's go into T for triceps so we can see. There we are. And it takes a while. Unfortunately, this program is very large. Come on. There we are. Oh, okie dokie. Great. There's the whole triceps. We'll get the whole thing in there. All right, there it is. Let's bring this around to the back so you can see the extension function. See the large tendon there? This one makes a little more sense. Here's the long head, and you see it really actually is at the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula here. Here's the lateral head. And if I fade the lateral head and move this around a tiny bit, you can see deep to that is the medial head. That one right there is the medial head, okay? So they all work together for extension of the elbow. The long head can extend the shoulder and adduct the shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint. Both biceps and triceps brachii are easy to palpate anytime you put your hand on the back of your arm. All of this is triceps. It's easy to feel it contract underneath your fingers, so you can palpate this one at home. Again, same with biceps brachii. All right, so that is it for the superficial muscles of the shoulder and arm. We had triceps, biceps, serratus anterior, pec major. We had latissimus dorsi and trapezius. We had we also had teres major. I almost forgot about lat's little helper. Oh, how could I? Okay. All right, so that's it for the muscles of this unit. I recommend now that you study the muscles individually. You can use the chart that I've provided down at the bottom of your module. And we will also be talking a little bit about some disorders of these muscles and disorders of the shoulder. So stay tuned for that.